The studio lights gleamed their familiar golden hue across the set of Lorraine, casting soft warmth on the pastel backdrop and polished wooden floors. The audience buzzed with anticipation, the kind that intensified the moment someone special was about to walk on stage. And today, that someone was Sir Paul McCartney. For many in the audience, this moment felt surreal. This wasn't just a celebrity guest, it was a piece of living musical history stepping into the room. When Paul finally walked through the side entrance, a wave of energy surged through the studio. People stood instantly, clapping with an enthusiasm usually reserved for rock concerts, not early morning talk shows. Paul waved casually, his familiar charm shining through, and flashed that small, warm smile that had once caused entire stadiums to scream. Even now, he carried himself with the relaxed grace of someone who knew exactly who he was, someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. Lorraine rose from her chair, arms outstretched. "Paul, so lovely to have you back," she said, her accent bright and friendly. He leaned in for a brief hug before taking his seat. "Always nice to be here, Lorraine." The cameras zoomed in. The director signaled a smooth live cut. Lorraine's trademark warmth filled the space immediately. "Paul, the world is buzzing about this new tour of yours," she said with excitement. "Tickets are disappearing in seconds. It's absolute madness." Paul chuckled, crossing one leg over the other as he settled comfortably into the chair. "Well, we've been having a lot of fun with it. The band's in good shape. People still seem to enjoy a bit of music." The audience laughed, a gentle wave of admiration sweeping through them. Lorraine nodded along, flipping to the next cue card with a practiced rhythm. The first few minutes were pleasant, nostalgic, and easy, exactly the kind of interview viewers expected from the show. But then something shifted. Lorraine's smile tightened just a little as her eyes skimmed the next card. She hesitated only a fraction of a second, but Paul, ever perceptive, noticed. Still, he said nothing. "Now, Paul," she began, her tone changing subtly, "your tour is obviously selling well, but there's something else making the rounds online." Paul quirked an eyebrow, still calm. "Oh, what's that?" Lorraine tapped the card with a single manicured nail. "There've been critics saying your voice isn't what it used to be. That maybe you're leaning too heavily on nostalgia. Some have even gone as far as saying you should, perhaps step back." The studio went silent instantly. No laughter, no murmurs, just the sudden, sharp awareness that the morning show niceties had disappeared. Paul's expression didn't shift dramatically, he didn't bristle or frown. Instead, his face softened in a way that suggested he was choosing his response very carefully. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose people will always have opinions." Lorraine pressed on, leaning forward slightly. "But do you think there's truth in it? That maybe it's time to let younger artists take the stage fully without, how should I put this, being overshadowed by legends who won't step aside?" A few gasps echoed in the audience. Someone whispered, "Oh, come on," while another shook her head, visibly uncomfortable. Paul's brows lifted just a fraction. "That's quite the question," he said with a gentle, incredulous laugh, though there was no humor in his eyes. Lorraine shrugged, attempting a casual air that didn't quite land. "I'm just saying what people are talking about. There's chatter that maybe you're hanging on a bit longer than necessary." Paul looked at her steadily, his gaze soft but unwavering. "I've spent my entire life making music. And I still enjoy it. That's all." Lorraine nodded, but her expression said she wasn't satisfied. "But do you think it's appropriate, let's say, to keep touring when some critics say the quality isn't the same?" From the audience, a disapproving murmur rose, stronger this time. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel. Paul inhaled deeply, keeping his composure. "Lorraine," he said quietly, "I don't think it's fair to say someone shouldn't perform because they've aged. Everyone ages. Artists evolve." Lorraine offered a tight smile. "I understand, but we have to be honest, don't we? If the product changes, people notice." A faint, subtle shift occurred in Paul's expression, not anger, not annoyance, but a deep disappointment that washed across his features with graceful restraint. He straightened slightly in his chair. "Honesty is fine," he replied. "But there's a line between asking a question and being disrespectful." The crowd reacted immediately, some clapped softly, others whispered, "Exactly," while a few exchanged uneasy looks, wondering how Lorraine would handle being called out on her own show. Lorraine blinked, clearly taken aback. "I'm not being disrespectful," she insisted. Paul tilted his head. "You're not trying to have a conversation. You're trying to get a reaction." A ripple rolled through the audience, half shock, half admiration. Lorraine's cheeks flushed, the faintest hint of irritation breaking through her practiced calm. The moment Paul McCartney returned from the backstage hallway, the atmosphere in the studio had changed in a way that even the crew could feel in their bones. Lorraine Kelly sat unusually stiff in her chair, her smile tightened around the edges. The audience, sensing tension like static in the air, sat forward cautiously. Paul re-entered with the calm of someone who had decided he wouldn't let the conversation twist him into someone he wasn't, but the tension from their earlier sparring hadn't dissipated at all, it had only coiled tighter. He walked back toward the chair, adjusting the sleeves of his jacket, and sat down with deliberate restraint. Lorraine inhaled deeply, her voice steady but thinner than before. "Paul," she began, "I think maybe our little disagreement earlier came from a misunderstanding." Paul nodded once. Misunderstandings happen, but sometimes they happen because someone insists on painting a picture that isn't there." Lorraine blinked rapidly, as if the word stung. "I was simply doing my job," she countered. "Asking questions people want to know." He leaned forward slightly, voice still calm, but firm in a way that made the audience shift uncomfortably. "There's asking, and then there's poking. You can ask me about my past, my choices, my career, but when you twist every question so it sounds like you're digging for scandal, that's when it stops being a conversation." A few audience members gasped softly. Lorraine tried to laugh it off, but the laugh came out sharp. "I wasn't twisting anything, I was doing an interview." Paul tilted his head. "Well, maybe your idea of an interview and mine are different." The moment hung heavy. Lorraine, sensing she was losing control of the narrative on her own show, straightened and switched topics abruptly. "Well," she said briskly, "let's talk about your latest album then. Some critics say it lacks the, how did one put it, the spark of your earlier work. Do you think age has?" Paul sat up, the anger finally cracking through his calm like lightning splitting a quiet sky. "Stop," he said, voice no longer gentle. "Just stop." The audience went dead silent. Cameras kept rolling. Production dared not cut. This was the kind of moment producers dream of and dread at the same time. Lorraine blinked, thrown. "Excuse me, I came on here to talk about music, life, creativity, real things. Not to be needled about age. You've brought it up 4 times now." "I'm only repeating what critics say," Lorraine replied, a defensive edge creeping in. "Well, maybe ask your own questions instead of hiding behind critics," Paul shot back. "If you've got something to say, just say it yourself." Lorraine's mouth opened and closed once, her composure slipping as whispers rose from the audience. She looked to her cue cards for a lifeline but found none. Trying to recover authority, she leaned in with that familiar tone she used when she wanted to pin a guest to a wall. "Paul, with all due respect, when someone's career spans decades, it's natural to question relevance. People wonder." "No," he interrupted sharply, pointing a finger, not aggressively, but in absolute clarity. "People don't wonder anything, you do, and you're trying to make them wonder." Lorraine froze, as if he'd peeled back the entire structure of her interviewing style and held it under a spotlight. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Paul stood up slowly, adjusting the lapels of his jacket again. Lorraine's eyes widened. "Are you leaving?" she asked, almost incredulous. "I think it's best," he replied. "This isn't a conversation, it's an interrogation," with a smile stitched over it. The producers behind the cameras motioned frantically, trying to salvage the segment. Someone waved their arms. Another mouthed, "Sit down, please." But Paul ignored them. Lorraine forced a strained laugh, trying to keep the facade up. "Paul, come on, don't be dramatic." He turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes shut down any illusion she still held. "This isn't drama, this is boundaries. You crossed them, Lorraine." The studio was so quiet it felt like the lights themselves were holding their breath. Lorraine swallowed hard. "I'm sorry you feel that way." "That's not an apology," he replied. "That's you saying my reaction is the problem." The audience reacted audibly this time, some gasping, others mumbling in agreement or astonishment. Lorraine's face flushed pink. It was rare that anyone, let alone someone with Paul's stature, called her out on her own show.